Two articles under it. First article is 29 within that. And let us read 29 clause 1. It says any section of society, any section of citizens. So very important point, it talks about citizens. So it is available to citizens. Now, unlike other articles, this only does not talk about citizens, right? So there is a very important distinction to be drawn. Whereas there is a singular word citizen, wherever it comes singularly, then it indicates that it is more individual centric. But here it doesn't come singularly. It comes with another word, sections of citizens, which necessarily means that it is meant for group of people, which is what we generally call communities. Okay. So there's a very important distinction to remember, that this is not talking about individual citizens. It is talking about sections of citizens, which is what this put together actually mean communities, right? Not to the individuals. Of course, individuals are part of it, so it is available to the individuals, but the focus is on sections of citizens. Another important thing you have to see, this is again very important. This is available to these communities of citizens of India only residing in the territory of India. Is only residing in the territory of India or any part thereof, having distinct language, script, or culture of its own, and shall have the right to conserve this. We have seen this. We have seen that it is only available in territory of India. Then it is available to whom? Available against whom? Of course, state and individuals also. If it does not specifically state whether it is that the state shall not do this, then it is available against state. But if it does not make distinction between state and the other, then it is available against the individuals and state both. So दोनों के against आपके पास available है. So if individual violates this fundamental right, again you can enforce it in court of law. State violates, if state violates, still you can do that, right? Then what does it offer? It offers right to what? Conserve. वो आगे पीछे हो गया, but समझने के लिए what does it offer? It offers right to conserve. Conserve what? Not any culture. A distinct culture. It has to have a distinct culture. Distinct one. What? Culture, script, and it talks about these three things. Right. The right is to conserve. What? If there is a distinct culture or script or a language of what? Any sections of society. If there is a group of people or a community which has its own distinct means separate from others, different from others, culture, script, and language. It is available only in the territory of India. For example, if that community, a few members of that community, if they say live in USA, then they don't have this right available there. Okay? Because they will be governed by that law. It's very simple. Now, what is culture? Let's spend some time on this. What do you understand by culture? No. Religious practices. Okay, one thing. Because, generally we use a lot of words, but we really don't comprehend its true meaning. So religious practice is not culture. Religious practices sometimes can be part of one's culture. Culture is much more than religion. So culture is a very, very wide, very broad term. So as Trupti said, religious practices can form part of culture. But what fundamentally culture is, as we have been seeing, the way of life. Best word to explain culture is the way of life. Now that way of life is anything and everything that an individual or a body of individuals does in their lifetime. So, as you said, religious practices, if that are part of your way of life, then it's part of your culture. और आपने क्या कहा? Ancestral teachings. Well, what are those teachings? So everything, the festival that you celebrate, the occasions that you celebrate, or mourn means जिसका आप दुख भी मनाते हैं, ऐसे occasions भी हो. किसी चीज आप किस तरह से करते हो, करने का स्पेशल तरीका हो सकता है. आपका food, the food that you eat is a part of your culture. The clothes that you wear are part of your culture. Rituals at various stages of your life, life cycle events from birth or even before birth to death and even after death. You observe them, you celebrate or mourn them in some particular way, even that is part of your culture. So culture that way is a very, very broad. Religion is a small part of culture. There can be many other things other than your religious practices that form you form your culture. But then in Indian context, we generally tend to confuse culture and religion, and we tend to use these two terms interchangeably, which is completely wrong. There can be culture without religion. So there are some cultures which may not have any religion. Somebody who does not belong to, or rather doesn't profess any religion, or doesn't identify oneself with any religion, can still have a culture. So everybody will have a culture. Everybody need not have a religion. And somebody has a religion, that religion and its practices, its observances will form part of culture. It's clear? So let's draw a distinction. Now, script and language are very closely related. So what is script and what is language? You understand the difference between these two? It's very easy, or you don't. So script and language again are not one and same thing. They are very distinct. Script is a body of symbols which is used to denote a language, and language is a medium of communication. Means what? It is the thoughts expressed to certain words that constitute a language. Okay? Bhasha. तो ये script को क्या कहते हैं? लिपि. You know, I don't know how to write लिपि in Hindi, but this is how, maybe लिपि. I don't know whether you write like this or this. So लिपि and then bhasha. Yeah, समझने के लिए. So the language that I'm speaking right now is English, but when I write it like this, script, this is a Roman script. So I'm speaking in English language and writing in Roman script. यदि मैं ये हिंदी में कहूँ तो हिंदी में हम इसको भाषा कहते हैं, और अब मैं हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ और लिख रहा हूँ देवनागरी लिपि में, right? So generally a language, every language need not have a script. There are many languages which are simply spoken, but they do not have scripts, okay, of their own. They may be written in any other script, okay? So that's important to remember. But generally every script would have a language. Okay? Script है तो definitely language है, because उसके बगैर बनेगी. And one script can be used to write many languages, such as जैसे भाषा है, जैसे हिंदी भाषा है ना, तो हिंदी भाषा है, उसको मैंने देवनागरी में ऐसे लिखा, ये भाषा शब्द है ना, यदि मैं इसको ऐसा लिखूं भाषा, तो what I've done, I'm writing in हिंदी भाषा में, but Roman script में लिखा. But there are many languages. In fact, large number of languages which do not have their own script. They're only spoken, they're understood, and they're generally written in some other scripts. Now, because writing came much later, language came first, and writing came much later. For example, the Indus Valley people had script, they had a language, but their script was not really so developed, right? But they had one, and we have found lots of symbols indicating their script, which have not been able to be deciphered. उसको decipher नहीं हुआ अभी तक. But there were very minimal use of symbols was being done, pictorial script. So if there is a script which is very unique, which is very distinct, then that community which is using that script has a right to conserve it. We must focus this word conserve. We will come to what it means. Culture को भी conserve, और language यदि भाषा है आप, तो भाषा को भी आपको conserve करने का, उसको संरक्षित करने का. कंजर्व का हिंदी क्या होता है? उसको संरक्षित करने का, उसको बनाए रखने का, उसकी कंटिन्यूटी बनाए रखने का, उसको परपेचुएट करने का अधिकार उस सेक्शंस ऑफ सिटीजंस को है. This is what it is. Now, when we say that these rights are, if you read the heading, the title of the article talks about minority. But does it talk about minority, the body of the article? There's no word minority. So we have to understand one more thing, that even if there is a word minority, these communities, we generally would think that, okay, we're talking about some small groups of people, means minorities. But it is not only applicable to minorities, it is available to all sections of citizens, right? So this is minority plus majority, जो भी आप बोल रहे हो उसको. Now, in Indian context, minority and majority are generally defined only in religious, context. But that is the only way of classifying minority and majority, right? So the minorities and majorities can be formed on various other grounds also other than religion, right? So such as linguistic minority का भी एक concept आता, right? So minority can be based on religion, right? It can be based on language. So we have to understand that this article, this protection is applicable to all. ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई minority है उसी को ये अधिकार प्राप्त है conserve करने का. Majority के भी कुछ sections हो सकते हैं. Otherwise, they form a part of majority, so-called majority, right? So to understand minority, majority, let's try to understand how do we actually use them. So basically, minority. Now this word minority is really not defined in the concept, but then we come across certain definitions of it. which is in Minority Commission Act. There is one mention. So based on religion, it is the government of India by a notification comes out with the minority, religious minority. They have to notify. If they notify, then that becomes a minority. So based on religion, what are the minorities in India? So who does it on the religion? It is the union government. Union government does, and they have from time to time come up with notifications. And now we have some 6 minorities already notified by the government of India. What are those? Muslims, and these are all based on these are all based on what? Yes, these are all based on religion. Christians, then we have Sikh, then we have Buddhists, then we have Jain, and then Parsi also. So we in India call them Parsi. So ये है religious minorities of India notified by the central government. So it is applicable to all these minorities, of course, and also to majority, but we are concerned with more minorities right now. How about the linguistic minorities? So these are the minorities, they are based on language. So the linguistic minorities, who defines them? So it is left to the states to determine. The state governments will do this, identifying if there are linguistic minorities. So in India, there are so many languages, So of course we have only 22 languages in 8th schedule, right? But is that the only set of languages that we have? No, there are hundreds, thousands of languages in India, right? And the way they are spoken is very different. If there is one language, the way it is spoken in different parts is also very different. You speak Hindi in a very different way in one part of the country, and you speak same Hindi language in a very different way. A lot of difference in words and accent and the way you say. If you speak Marathi in one part of Maharashtra, you speak Marathi language, yes, but in a very different way in some other part. So if there is any distinct script or language somewhere, then the state governments can notify, and then those people will have right to do what? Conserve. Now, important thing is what is the way of conserving? How do we conserve any of these? So what is that right? Because you have to translate into something very practical, right? Conserve करने का right है मतलब क्या है? It sounds very abstract. Otherwise, क्या करेंगे आप? आपकी language conserve करने का आपको अधिकार है. How does it translate into actions on your part? What do you do with that? So if there is a group of people and they speak a very specific language, जैसे कोरकू लोग है ना? कोरकू एक कम्युनिटी है और वो एक स्पेसिफिक तरह की कोरकू लैंग्वेज बोलते हैं. कोरकू है ना? It's a tribal community, for example, and they speak a very specific type of language called Korku language. Now, the state can identify them. Okay, this is a very distinct language. It is only spoken by Korku people, and that too of some specific region, and then that needs protection. So what they can do is then they have a right to teach that language to their children. How do you conserve a language? They have right to communicate in that language, right? आप उनको नहीं बोल सकते कि इस भाषा में नहीं बोलोगे, आप तो हिंदी में बोलो. No, they have a right to speak in their own language. They have a right to teach that language to their children. Example of a language. Then they might actually need certain protection, because if you talking about their children going to say a Hindi medium school, in Hindi medium school they will be forced to learn Hindi, which means that they will not be able to use their language, Korku for example. That way their language will someday simply disappear. So then in that case, they can insist that no, our child should be, taught Korku. So that's the right that they have. Same is the case with the culture. But the culture, of course, there will be restrictions coming on culture. The culture you want to conserve, that cannot be against any law of the land. So वो limitation इसमें लिखा नहीं है. You have a right to conserve your culture, but that culture cannot be against any law of the land. किसी कानून के अगेंस्ट आप नहीं बोल सकते कि नहीं हमारे इसमें तो जिसको भी हम मिलेंगे उनको 2 चाटे मारना हमारा कल्चर है. So the law of the land is a condition which is not mentioned in the article, but that needs to be understood within the bounds of law of the land. You have the right to conserve your culture. आप किसी विशेष तरीके से कोई त्योहार मनाते हैं, वो वैसे मनाते रहने का आपको अधिकार within the bounds of the law. So we will then come to clause 2 of this, which is again slightly different than that, but it defines what we mean by conserve here. So clause 2 actually is telling us a way of actually how this could be conserved. So what can be done for that? Clause 2 आप जब पढ़ेंगे तो there will be little more clarity. It says no citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution maintained by state or receiving aid out of state funds on the ground of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. So now these two clauses seem to be completely disconnected, right? एक तरफ हम कंजर्व स्क्रिप्ट लैंग्वेज और कल्चर को कंजर्व करने का अधिकार दे रहे हैं और उसके क्लॉज में एक बिल्कुल नई बात कह रहे हैं. क्या कह रहे हैं? Nobody shall be denied admission in a education institution which is being given aid or being maintained by the state, which is to say that is actually in a way talking about, without saying so in as many words, is talking about what? Is talking about minorities. जब आप यहाँ कह रहे हो, फॉर एग्जाम्पल आप कह रहे हैं कि भाई हमें हमारी कल्चर, हमारी लैंग्वेज और स्क्रिप्ट तीनों है, एक कम्युनिटी है, और वो कहती है, बिकॉज वी विल टॉक अबाउट दैट इन नेक्स्ट आर्टिकल 30, वो कहते हैं कि वी हैव अ राइट टू हैव अ कंजर्व आवर लैंग्वेज. सो हम क्या कर रहे हैं? हम अपनी कोरकू लैंग्वेज में ही एक स्कूल खोल रहे हैं और उसमें कोरकू लैंग्वेज में ही पढ़ेंगे और हमारी खुद की स्क्रिप्ट है उसी में पढ़ाएंगे और उसमें हम क्या पढ़ाएंगे? अपना कल्चर पढ़ाएंगे, क्योंकि यही हमारा तरीका है इसको कंजर्व करने. सो दैट दे कैन डू, दे हैव द राइट. They have the right under Article 29 also, and now 30 also, because that gives a specific right to minority institutions. But if that institution is receiving aid from the state, यदि आप सरकार की पैसे की मदद से उसको चला रहे हैं और सरकार की तरफ से उसके मेंटेनेंस के लिए सहयोग ले रहे हैं, या सरकार ही उसको चला रही है आपके लिए, ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि सरकार चलाए, तब फिर in those institutions clause 2 will come into picture. No citizen shall be denied admission. Now here let us draw a distinction between two things. यहाँ पर पहली बार एक नया चीज इंट्रोड्यूस हो रहा है क्लॉज 2 में. No, 29(2) is one distinction. No person shall be denied, but we are not talking private. If you are a body of, you are a section of society, citizens, and you are opening your own school, for example, with your own money, contribution, say from your own community, you are not taking any aid from the state or government, then this clause will not apply. Then you can say that, okay, only Korku children will be admitted to the school, and that will be fair enough. But if you are receiving aid or some other assistance from the government, then this will come in picture. But then the distinction will be not on what ground you cannot. So those grounds are very important. What is that ground? Religion, okay? Then race, then caste, then language. These are the 4 things which are mentioned here. इनके grounds पे आप, or on the grounds alone, any of these, ऐसे institutions में admission cannot be denied. Okay, so if you see, there is one fresh entry into these things. अभी तक हम लोग इसमें और क्या होता था? इसमें sex होता था और place of birth भी होता था, right? So these are not now. These are not there under Article 29. This could be a question of pre. So sex and place of birth are not the grounds under Article 29, and instead there's one addition, language, because we're talking about language and script and all those things. So this is to protect the rights of other children also, because if that institution is receiving aid, then that is aid is coming from the people, the taxes that the government collects from all the people. Clear hai? So this is a distinction.